And I also want to thank all of you who supported our show, cared enough to do something about it, to make your voices heard so that mine could be heard. I will never forget it.
Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Wednesday, September 24th, 2025. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety, alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. On today's episode, we'll hear from Sterlin Harjo, creator of Reservation Dogs. He's back with a new series for FX, The Lowdown. I hand the mic to my Variety colleague Michael Schneider, who interviews Harjo about his new series that you might call Tulsa Noir. And we'll hear from Variety's Clayton Davis on the surprise news this weekend that Christopher Nolan has been elected president of the Directors Guild of America. But before we get to that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. Jimmy Kimmel and his return to ABC last night is still the biggest story in entertainment. That was a clip from Kimmel's monologue that you heard as the cold open to this episode. To me, and in the view of many critics, he struck just the right tone. You could hear the crack of emotion in his voice as soon as he opened his mouth. He was genuine and emotional without being syrupy. He did not apologize. He delivered laugh-out-loud zingers, and he pulled out the receipts on the hypocrisy of those self-styled free speech warriors who have been trying to get him pushed off the air. All in all, Tuesday's episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live was inspired, heartfelt television from someone who has truly grown up on the airwaves. All of Variety's coverage and perspective on Kimmel and the battle for late night can be found on Variety.com right now, along with so much more. Now we turn to conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. The new Ethan Hawke drama, The Lowdown, premieres tonight on FX. Michael Schneider, Variety's TV editor, who is also a producer and host of Variety's Award Circuit podcast, checks in here with Sterlin Harjo, creator and showrunner of The Lowdown.
Thanks, Cynthia. So I was a tremendous fan of FX's critically acclaimed 3-season series Reservation Dogs and could tell how much creator Sterlin Harjo revered the art of cinema. Episodes would often contain nods to various genres and films, and even the series finale was an homage to Robert Altman's Nashville. So it's probably no surprise that when Harjo set out to create his follow-up to Res Dogs, he decided to tackle another one of his favorite styles, film noir. The Lowdown, which premieres Tuesday on FX, stars Ethan Hawke as a citizen journalist named Lee Raybon, who calls himself a truth historian while investigating the seedy underbelly of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I recently caught up with Harjo to talk about The Lowdown, and I began by asking him how he landed on doing a noir as the follow-up to Res Dogs.
It was during Res Dogs, I think, like, a lot of episodes would be different genres. Like, we would play with different genres within episodes. And that kind of made me fall more in love with genre. I was always a fan, but, like, realizing how much I could say within the confines and the sort of parameters of genre was exciting to me. And then one of my favorite genres is noir. I just have always been drawn to it. I just am such a fan. Neo-noir, everything under this thing. I just sort of devour it, and it's the most exciting to me. And I just had always thought, I could set something in Tulsa. Like I think noirs that are set in LA right now, it's just kind of been done, like the underbelly has been explored, but the underbelly of Tulsa, conspiracy of Tulsa, places in the middle of America, they haven't been explored yet.
And Tulsa, obviously, as we know, has a really dark history. You touch on that in the show, too, as we discuss more about the 1921 massacre. And that's part of the history of this city. So, but you're from that area too, so I'm sure you have a complicated relationship with Tulsa.
Yeah, I love Tulsa. I mean, I think every place has a really dark history in America. Every city does. I think it's about your relationship with that darkness on how you move forward as a place, And in the last 10 years or so, through some of the work for an organization I did called This Land Press, through the show The Watchmen, through a lot of activists from North Tulsa, a lot of activists from Tulsa in general. A lot of people have, brought more truths out about the history of Tulsa, especially when it pertains to the Tulsa Race Massacre. That truth and being honest with your past is healing, and it's brings a community back together and wakes people up. And you're seeing that happen now. There's still a long way to go, but it's happening. And the history of Tulsa and the history of Oklahoma in general is, one of darkness, just like the rest of the United States, but specifically it was Indian territory. And my tribe and a lot of other tribes were on the trail, marched to Oklahoma on the Trail of Tears and, displaced. A lot of people died and had to make a new home out of a place they didn't understand that well or know that well. So, but then it's also a story of survival, I mean, those tribes rebuilt and those tribes are thriving now. So as much as it is a story of you're touching on darkness, it's also, you see survival in Oklahoma and in Tulsa. Tulsa was founded by Muskogee Creek people, which is my tribe. And it just felt like, it hadn't been explored in film yet. And I found it exciting.
Oh, I feel like I'm learning a lot. Like, I didn't know about Leroy Chapman, the muckraker who Ethan's character is kind of loosely based on.
He's inspired by Leroy, yeah.
Tell me more about that. Tell me about him and how you like sort of came upon him to kind of create Ethan's character.
Yeah, so I was friends with him. I mean, I worked with him, and we
Oh, I
did a
didn't even realize that. That's
yeah.
amazing.
So we worked for an organization called This Land Press, and I was a struggling independent filmmaker. I needed a job. They gave me free rein to make documentaries in Tulsa about whatever I wanted to make. And a lot of that was excitement because we were telling the truth. We were talking about the race massacre. We were talking about stories that happened locally, and we were really kind of holding a mirror up to our city, and really kind of presenting the city with a reflection of itself, for better and for worse, the good and the bad. And something about that's very healing, about seeing yourself truthfully. And Leroy was a big champion of that. And Leroy, I did a series with him called Tulsa Public Secrets, and where I rode shotgun in his white van. And he was a journalist. He was also he was a historian, a researcher. He did a lot of things. He made shirts. Made art. He was an artist. But one thing that he was obsessed with was talking about things that a lot of people weren't either interested in or didn't want to talk about. And a lot of that involving the truth. And I just, took a lot from him, was inspired by him, as you do a lot of people. And he passed away. And I almost made a feature film about him, but then I put it away. And then, once Res Dogs was being made and I knew I was going to end it, I was like, I still want to do a noir. And I was kind of just trying to think of the right thing. And so I just kind of took the concept that I had before, and took inspiration from my old friend and inspiration from the script that I'd been writing and turned it into the pilot for the Lowdown.
And then, of course, you've been buddies with Ethan for a long time. He showed up
Yeah.
and did some great stuff with you on Res Dogs.
Yeah.
Talk about pitching this to him and getting him involved.
Yeah, it's funny. I originally, we'd been writing together before Res Dogs, and then he was in Res Dogs, and after that, I was like, oh, I just really want to work with Ethan. And I had this idea of like he was someone I wanted to cast in this show, but like whenever you become friends, it's a little you don't want to like hurt the friendship, and I didn't want to just go, hey, will you be in this movie or show? So I just sent it to him under the guise that I wanted notes. I wanted to get notes back from my script. And I was just trying to see if, like, if he was into it and see what his reaction was. And luckily, he read it and said, "Why am I not playing this guy?" And
Yeah.
from that point on, I'm like, "Well, you are." And that point on, we made, that's what it was. And from then on, I was writing. Even though I was writing for him before, I was really writing for Ethan after that.
This cast is ridiculous, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, you pulled off just an amazing setup. Both folks who we're familiar with, but even folks from other worlds. Like I love seeing Killer Mike on there. I mean, it's just this is. I mean, it seems like you had a lot of fun and maybe a little bit of the pick of the litter in terms of who you wanted to work with.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, so many people agreed to be in this show. And, part of that's Ethan, part of that's other actors, but I think a lot of it is Reservation Dogs. A lot of
Yeah.
people were inspired and really liked that show. And it was, I think it's a movie lover show, and they could see that I was also a movie lover and wanted to support me in some way. A lot of them, a lot of the actors are from Oklahoma originally, and I think you feel some of that. And I don't know, it was, I'm totally blown away with the caliber of actors that I've worked with. I've been doing this a long time, and I mean, for instance, like Kyle MacLachlan, I met when I was at the Sundance Labs. He was an actor for another project there. I met him there, and he was in a screenplay reading of mine, and he played white character. So did Philip Seymour Hoffman. And I think about that. Like, I remember he was saying some line and it made people laugh. And someone in the front row said, "You should be in his film." And I remember Kyle saying, "I'll be in anything he makes." And I didn't take him up on it then, but 20 years later, I cashed that check. And I called him up and asked if he'd be in the show.
We talk about the noir and sort of, really wanted to do a noir. What is it about that genre, and what did you really just enjoy in getting to do, this an 8 episode sort of homage to that genre, but doing it in that very specific Sterlin Harjo way?
I think I love noir because it's about flawed people and flawed characters, and no one gets out alive unscathed. There's some truth to it. It's about human nature. It's about the darkness. It's about the darkness in our cities. It's about the darkness in our choices in life. And it really explores the dark side. And then you kind of, this is in a genre of neo noir and funny. And it's like, and then you get to balance the dark and the humor. And I don't know, it's just an exciting, exciting genre that anything can happen in. And you're dealing with big questions and small questions and morality and all of these things. And I just find it exciting.
That's Sterlin Harjo, creator of The Lowdown, which premieres Tuesday on FX and the next day on Hulu.
Now we turn to Clayton Davis catching up with the surprise news that Christopher Nolan has been elected president of the Directors Guild of America. Clayton and I try to pull off our best Inception-style inquiry as to why the most prominent director of his generation has taken on this very big side gig. Clayton Davis, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Cynthia.
There has been a lot of news the last couple of days. Of course, everybody has been riveted to the Jimmy Kimmel story. But on Saturday night, a big thing happened that didn't get as much attention as it would have because there were a whole lot of other big things going on in the world. Christopher Nolan was elected president of the Directors Guild of America. And on the one hand, that's not that surprising. Christopher Nolan has been involved with the DGA. He's been on the board. He was on the board just before his election. It surprised me, and I think a lot of industry people, that a filmmaker of his stature with a very big project on the horizon would raise his hand and take on this considerable job. Clayton, what do you think's going on here?
So, I mean, it's definitely the highest profile figure I can remember. See, I'm the head of the DGA. He has such a great relationship with studios, and he's very pro theatrical. So, with the negotiations coming up, that's someone that's probably going to pound the pavement fighting AI. But it caught me by surprise because he just wrapped shooting The Odyssey, which is the next big movie post Oppenheimer. He just won the Oscar 2 years ago. And I can't recall someone as huge at the top of his game, who is by many measures considered an awards darling, taking on a position as prominent as that.
I think the timing, especially with The Odyssey, which, as we know now, awards campaigns, PR campaigns for big movies, this can be a year-long effort for people. In terms of what we've seen where Christopher Nolan has spoken out about artist rights issues, about studio and economic issues affecting artists, he's got a very clear lens on artist rights. And right now, everybody in the industry is grappling with AI. You've had all these guilds coming up with statements, basically stating explicitly that content is made by humans. My hunch is that he feels like this is a very fraught time for artists in general, for filmmakers, for directors, and he wants to be at the table having a voice. Does that ring true to you from what you know of Christopher Nolan?
I would assume that that's a fair assumption. And he is someone that was very vocal about the way theatrical needs to continue to live on, and what better way, not only for yourself, but also the artists that are coming up underneath you, than being that voice at the table. I'm excited for what he's going to bring.
I think the industry sees him as a standard bearer of a certain quality on the big screen. It's no secret there's historically been a lot of tension between the Writers Guild of America and the Directors Guild of America. But when you have somebody like Christopher Nolan at the table, it might be a little harder for others to take cheap shots just because he is so well respected. Segueing to why Christopher Nolan, why we're talking about him this way. What is it about him personally that has made him such a brand? He's not someone out there on social media all the time. You don't see him in party coverage, but he's as big a director brand as there exists right now. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. It's very rare that the director's name can carry the weight of a movie, and Nolan has built that. And I think obviously the biggest transition for him was during the Dark Knight trilogy, because I mean he was a known entity, and we all love Memento. But when Batman Begins, and then obviously the Dark Knight, when that transition happened, it was kind of game over in terms of this is a guy who's here to stay, and he gets final cut. You ask Christopher Nolan what movie he wants to do, he's not pitching you a movie. And I think if he does what we think he will intend to do, which is bring fair things to the members, the studios may have a different type of negotiation ballgame on their hands come next year.
A very experienced agent years ago told me just emphatically, as if it was gospel fact, that whoever is elected the head of SAG, it was SAG back then, DGA and WGA, they're always punished. They don't work for a while. The studios always punish them. I don't know if I entirely believe that. I think there's been some truth to it at times, but certainly Christopher Nolan is going to challenge that. And I do want to just say, as a longtime Leslie Linka-Glotter fan, the outgoing DGA president, who has directed some incredible episodes of television, Homeland, Mad Men, I can cite the episodes specifically. She served 2 terms as president of DGA during very difficult times for the Helmers Guild. So she has definitely earned her stripes. Thank you, Clayton.
Thank you.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. Variety's annual Entertainment and Technology Conference will be held tomorrow, September 25th in Los Angeles. Our speakers include the Duffer Brothers of Stranger Things fame. We have Jerry Bruckheimer talking about the technological feats of F1 the movie. And we have an array of CEOs, producers, talent, and technologists talking about the intersection of where we all live these days, entertainment and technology. Highlights to come next week and on Daily Variety's companion podcast, Strictly Business. Before we go, congrats to screenwriter Michelle Mulroney and showrunner Tom Fontana. Mulroney was elected Tuesday as president of the Writers Guild of America West. Fontana was elected last week to lead the WGA East. Both are seasoned scribes and both have a lot on their plates with studio contract talks coming up next year. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Michael Schneider and Clayton Davis. Sticks, Nicks, Hick Picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and please tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety.